Alright. Welcome to Todd's Hardcore Media. I have my own experiences. Hope everyone is having a great morning, night, wherever you are. And it should be putting up my scene here. Why is it? Hold on. Why doesn't it have my scene?
It's a massive white building.
All right. Let's see here. There it is. Should be on there. Give it time for YouTube. Let's see. All right.
At Iran's nuclear.
All right. So this is from Max Afterburner. Why did B-2s obliterate this one Iranian nuclear target? Which, yeah, right here looks like there are parts right here. That right by this football soccer stadium here.
Your facility at Fordo. Why is it still standing? I mean, check this thing out.
Shout out to Max Afterburner, former pilot. I think he still does some pilots. He's done fighters, and F-16s, F-18s, and stuff like that. He's been naval, Air Force stuff and everything. So he's a real pilot, so he knows a lot about bombs, ordnance, different fighters, Air Force fighters, naval fighters, stuff like that, and everything. So shout out to him.
It's the size of a football field. I've put a few other things here for you to get an idea of the size of this thing. So bigger than a football field. So what could this thing be? Is this potentially the Ayatollah's water polo stadium? Maybe it's the spot he goes to when he's trying to play pickleball. But it's just very interesting that of all the buildings that were struck across Iran's nuclear arsenal, why is this one still standing? And then in this video, I'll be reviewing why it could be, what potentially Iran is doing to rework their nuclear program, and then just quickly hitting on these craters here. You can see these craters with a 3,000-foot house next to it. That's about the size of my house. And then you scan down, and you got the big mansion there. That's my wife's boyfriend's house. I mean, she says it's his personal trainer's house, Brad. Apparently, he's the pickleball instructor.
They always say that. My girlfriend always says that's my best friend's house. It's not. My ladies always have had boyfriends. Just
she tells me that he's just a personal trainer. So, I mean, what do I have to worry about? It's the guy that she told me not to worry about. It also looks like it could be the Ayatollah's vacation house. You can see the craters next to it right there where those GBU 57s went down the vent shaft. 3 went there next to the Ayatollah's vacation house, and then 3 went there next to this house. And then there's a car here to give you an idea of the scale of those. But this video is primarily going to be about weaponeering, targeting, what actually happened in order to save this massive white building. What could be inside it? Are there potentially centrifuges spinning inside of it so you can't take it out because of the radiation risk? I'm going to cover all of that in this video. And then I want to scale down a little bit, give you a closer in view of that white building. You can see the tunnel entrances are to the left side of that, and then you've got that big white building right there with some roads, and then what looks to be, I don't know, maybe some sort of little track going from the corner of that big white building down into the caves and tunnels. So we'll check that out. There's a close...
Yeah, it was like 40 feet around here, 60 or something. They have it like that for a reason, and that's a prime target that I want to take it out and see all these entrances. Yeah, and Trump really messed things up with the ceasefire. Anyways.
Up of that big white building. It's massive, again, the size of a football field, and you can see how it's cut into the rock. It's cut into the side of the earth. So why does this thing need to be deep within the earth? It's just kind of odd. I mean, maybe they just needed a big flat place to store equipment, but it just seems very odd that it's just sitting right there. And then this is a view of a few days before the nuclear strikes, when the U.S. did the strikes with the GBU-57s. You can see a whole bunch of cargo trucks lined up right there. So definitely odd, definitely a little bit strange. Those cargo trucks lined up prior to the strike. So what were they removing? Or were those just the trucks that were bringing the dirt to block the entrances? I mean, I guess that could be the case as well. Lots of vehicles spotted in the area outside Fordo. And then this building was struck, this is a very interesting thing to me. So this massive building near the craters, you can see the craters right here. There's those craters. And those are over one of the vent shafts. And then this building right here was struck. All the different little outposts and buildings near the vent shaft, those were all taken down. And it looks like those were smaller buildings than the actual football field size building itself. So it's just very odd. And then there's a side view. You can get a good view of the tunnels here on this one. Look at that. So those are the entry tunnels. There's one set of entry tunnels, second set of entry tunnels, and then you've got this road, this mysterious road going up to the pickleball facility for the Ayatollah. You can see there, it almost looks like it's got an overhang on the sides, kind of like a delivery or shipping type building. Maybe it's Amazon. Maybe Amazon's just expanding their operations. They got some cheap property near the Fordo nuclear site. And then it's got some what looks like to be like skylights on the top of it. And then again, there's a good side angle for you to see how deep it is. I mean, that looks like 3 or 4 stories deep, maybe even more. And then it's got like that fence, potentially some tracks type stuff around it. Very odd. And then those tracks kind of go down. Okay, that's a fence. It looks like that could be a fence because there's that entry border right there. There's that.
Yeah, it is right there. Yeah.
Entry gate, if you will. And then that fence is going to go all the way around with a guard post up there on that top corner, that top right corner. So that's very interesting. Guard post with a fence. Who are they keeping out? I mean, honestly, maybe they're keeping people in. They're keeping the Ayatollah's water polo team in that are trying to escape. And then this is a view. We'll get more into this later in the video, so definitely stay to the end of the video, but it looks like some potential construction going on near one of the craters. And then this 3D image, this 3D rendering of the tunnels themselves, you can see on the right corner, that's that massive building right there. And then you can see maybe it's supposed to like have generators in it that provide some sort of air source into the tunnels. But again, these tunnels look pretty self-sufficient, and I'll dive more into what's actually in these things and the centrifuges throughout this video, so definitely stay to the end. So we're diving into why that white building wasn't hit. I mean, that white building stands out like a you-know-what in sweatpants, and they just decided to not hit it, which is very strange. But we'll talk about where the Iranian nuclear program has gone since the strikes and where it likely goes from here, because I think that's the most important thing for us to understand. The fact that Iran still wants to build a nuclear program, and it's not just over, okay, you guys win. No, they are definitely still trying to build their program. So we'll get into what they likely are doing, who they're reaching out to, and where we go from here. But the U.S. and Israel delivered a surgical gut punch to Iran's nuclear sites. Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. Literally craters throughout those sites, scars in the earth. The centrifuges inside Fordo and Natanz are scrap. Iran's nuclear ambitions are put on ice for now. But this white building, it's untouched. It's like it has a stealth cloak or something like that. The B-2s and submarines were executing these strikes, and they couldn't spare one extra weapon to just strike this building. Definitely strange. So we'll talk about who called those shots and why that massive building is likely still standing, what's likely inside of it, and we'll give a brief overview of the entire operation. And those different sites were mainly struck by the GBU-57 at Fordo, 12 of those, 2 GBU-57s at Natanz, and then Tomahawk strike missiles going into Isfahan. But also, as unsung heroes, F-35Is dropping JDAMs at Natanz, definitely striking some of those surface sites, potentially striking some of the surface sites at Fordo as well. And then Harop drones. These are the unsung heroes for sure. These things are amazing at targeting strategic targets. They also have AI on board, so they can flex and redirect their strikes while they're en route or while they're even just hovering overhead waiting to be ordered on what to strike. And then with the Tomahawk missiles, those things can loiter, and we're going to get into an interesting fact about those things loitering and those strikes from the submarine later on in the video. And if it's your first time coming to the videos, my name's Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, also known as the fighter pilot next door, F-15E combat fighter pilot, F-16 Thunderbird pilot. My therapist is going to be very happy that I waited this long in the video to tell you I'm a pilot. So Iran's nuclear triad is comprised of Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. It's their strategic core for everything nuclear. Fordo is that fortress that's buried 295 feet in that Dr. Evil style mountain, and it's got centrifuges that used to be spinning faster than your complaints on your honey to-do list. Natanz, 140 miles south of Tehran, it's the enrichment hub with underground halls and surface labs. Isfahan, that is a historic tech center. It processes uranium into gas and solids, and it's key for weapons grade material. These sites are Iran's nuclear crown jewels, but in 2025 they faced a double-barreled shotgun blast from a 14-gauge shotgun because 14 GBU-57s fell on Natanz and Fordo. You see what I did there? And then Israel brought their military might to Isfahan, Fordo, and Natanz when it came to their surface structures, combined with Tomahawk missiles from the USS Georgia. Likely, that's not confirmed, but that's a ship that is in the region that could have launched those Tomahawks. We're going to get into all that. We'll do a brief overview of Midnight Hammer throughout this video. As a recap, 7 B-2 stealth bombers, 125 aircraft total with tankers, F-35s, F-22s, F-15Es, and F-16s, and the USS Georgia, which is an Ohio-class guided missile sub, unleashed a massive volley on Iran's nuclear structures. 14 massive ordnance penetrator bombs, 30,000-pound bunker busters fell out of the B-2. Those 30,000 pounders were the big heavy metal, and the B-2's the only one that can do that. And then the Tomahawk cruise missiles. The Maxar satellite imagery shows those craters, debris, and devastation across Fordo. Those ridges at Fordo literally look like they took uppercuts from Conor McGregor. And then Natanz has a 50-foot deep wound into its labs that were buried 50 feet under the earth, which are now rubble. Yet Fordo's got that big white building still standing there like a big you-know-what in sweatpants, just defiant, saying, what? I don't have to go to my room. But it's almost like calling for a bomb. It's like, look at us, look how shiny we are. It's essentially like the Ayatollah kept it so clean. He sent his little mini Ayatollahs out there to scrub it with a toothbrush. That's how clean this thing looks. But let's break down the weaponeering masterminds who planned this and who decided to not strike that big white building. And the weaponeering cell, that's the nerve center of the strike. But plotting this mission was tougher than dodging your spouse's "we need to talk" ambush. Because this wasn't any normal target, but these teams of engineers, intel analysts, and pilots, they're used to difficult problems. I used this exact same software while planning strikes in the F-15E, specifically with the GBU-28 5,000-pound bunker buster bomb. You can build the bunker itself, and then you can play it through and watch the bomb strike, see how deep it gets, see where you need to delay the fuse so that the fuse actually deploys and explodes in the cavern that you want it to explode in. But this cell will pick targets with surgical precision, and their whole goal is to cripple the enemy's core and to minimize collateral damage and to get the crews home safely. Intel usually comes in first to the strike planning. They talk about the satellite images. They use drones like the RQ-4 to study the target area and tell the pilots and the operators what they'll likely see. And then the weapons planners and engineers start to build the structure itself. And then the Central Intelligence Agency, they intercept human intelligence and signal intelligence. So human intelligence, exactly what you would think, intelligence from human sources, and then signals.
They're always laughing their asses off when they do stuff like that too. It's very fun. It's party time.
Intelligence is going to be that electronic intelligence using those sources of imagery to really break down where those vent shafts are and where the bombs need to go through. And using these sources of imagery, they were able to pinpoint Fordo's weakness, their Achilles heel. Their centrifuges are 295 feet down, but they were able to target the exact vent shafts that lead down into the storage facility. And the only weapon that would target those 290-foot depths was the MOP, the massive ordnance penetrator. So that's going to be the next thing that they think about. Okay, we've got this problem built, we see the structure, we see the vent shaft, what can actually go down and touch it? And in the program itself, you can actually select the weapon you want. All right, today we want the 30,000 pounder, the heavy metal. Let's get this thing down there. This thing makes AC/DC proud. And they struck that vent with the only bomb that would work. And then Isfahan Surface Labs, since they know Natanz and Fordo are going to take up those 14 GBU-57s, Isfahan Surface Labs, the thing that's left for those are those beautiful Tomahawk missiles coming off the USS Georgia. And that weapon cell is going to coordinate with the USS Georgia, that 560-foot Ohio-class guided missile submarine. They're going to prepare their strike extremely strategically. They're playing 4D chess underneath the ocean. So what that crew is going to do is they're going to lock in 30 Tomahawk land attack missiles, each with a 1,000-pound warhead, targeting Isfahan's labs in a chess game of precision. And this is the weaponeering cell's master strokes, with those Tomahawk missiles launching before the B-2s strike Fordo and then preserving surprise so the B-2s can exit. The USS Georgia Georgia is a modern marvel. It was refitted in 2008 from a ballistic missile sub. It's a floating arsenal, 18,750 tons. It's nuclear powered with 154 vertical launch tubes across 22 missile groups. It's got an AN/BQQ-10 sonar suite that maps the Gulf's murky depths, while photonics masts, digital periscopes replace old optics for stealthy navigation. The Mark 48 fire control system tied to global positioning systems and satellite links program each Tomahawk's path with 10-foot accuracy. The Tomahawk Block 5, a 20-foot beast, cruises at 550 miles per hour, skimming 100 feet above ground using terrain contour matching if it wants to. Digital scene matching and global positioning systems also guide it towards its target. Block 5 upgrades include loitering, in-flight retargeting, 1,000-pound blast fragmentation warheads, and those punch through concrete with 1,000-mile range. I like to think of these things like guided sledgehammers from Zeus himself. And speaking of those tunnel entrances, here is that video of that 3D rendering of the site. So you've got that white building in the corner right, and then as you slide back, you can see the ventilation shafts, you can see the centrifuge main halls, you can see blast traps. These images really give you an idea of what the halls look like. So as you can see, you've got the uranium enrichment tubes, and then you can see the actual vent shaft itself.
Real estate people are asking how do they know what that looks like. Like I said, I believe that Mossad has a lot of ways. They have a lot of people on their payroll. They have ways of getting information of where things are. It's very impressive what Mossad could do and what they could get intelligence-wise.
As we make our way into the actual halls, these are what the uranium centrifuges look like. These are advanced IR-6 centrifuges. These are cascade base plates. And then there is an IR centrifuge cooling pipe here on the bottom that helps keep everything cool. Additionally, keeping that entire tunnel cool, airflow is going to be huge. So without that vent shaft, you've got no airflow. And there you go. You can see that large tunnel hall that was targeted with blast fragmentation from those GBU-57s. And then you've got a nice little couch here. It looks like it's got some sort of massage capability built in. Maybe it's got like a uranium massage. So you can get radiated and get a massage at the same time. So you come up with a nice glow of your face. Never mind the fact that your skin's peeling. And then next to it, you got this big vending machine. I think likely the Ayatollah is a Twix guy. Seems like a Twix guy. Maybe a honey bun guy. And then there's a close-up of those centrifuges themselves. You can see those coils wrapped around them. And then I like this image because it shows you those 2 high voltage backup generators. So that building, that big white building, likely doesn't have its own generators. If there's already generators inside this building, why does it need to have its own massive amount of generators? And there doesn't seem to be some sort of tubing or ventilation connected to that white building. So again, maybe the mystery of it being some sort of a cooling station that doesn't really make sense since the halls themselves have their own generators. And then there, a big zoomed out view of the main entrance tunnels with that white building over there on the top right. So battle damage assessment. So the big thing is to get through those vent shafts, which are going to be up here on top above, and then get a good strike into those halls, those centrifuge cascade halls. If you can enter that, the massive amount of blast coming from those 5,600 pounds of tritonol are going to explode throughout this vent shaft, and it's going to be like Armageddon inside of there. So this gives you guys an idea of that 3D rendering of what's actually going on inside of it. And then stepping back, so you can kind of see that those tunnels right there in this picture, they're open, they haven't been closed off yet. And then there's that big building, that big white mystery building there with the fence around it, dug deep down. It's almost dug down like quarry. It's got like 5 or 6 stories of quarry in this one corner. So it just seems like a little bit overkill. If you just wanted a flat piece of earth, there's tons of flat pieces of earth like right here. You wouldn't need to put something this close. It could also be the Ayatollah's secret poker room or his secret cigar lounge. He goes in there and Miss Ayatollah gives him a hard time. She's been nagging him. She's like, you haven't built a nuke yet, and it's been decades. He's like, you're so demanding. I'm going away. I'm going away for the weekend. I'm going with the boys to the cigar lounge. So obviously those centrifuges were the high value target in this situation. And if you hit that 300-foot building, you're not going to do anything to those vent shafts. They're not connected. So there's no connection from that building to the actual uranium halls themselves. So maybe you just don't burn a weapon on a shed. And that's what the weaponeering cell thought. But let's say they were going to hit it. What would be the best weapon for this? So likely a 2,000-pound joint direct attack munition, a JDAM from an F-35I or an F-15I. deny. Those are cost effective, they're deadly, and they would essentially vaporize it. But they elected not to touch it, which is weird. But again, the VIPs, Natanz's 50-foot deep bunker for those mops, and then Fordo's 300-foot bunker for those 12 mops, and then Isfahan with the ability for them to use their surface sites to do research and to do other type of refinement on uranium. That is definitely the focus of these strikes. But I think it's definitely plausible that we see this site struck in the future. Sources are saying anywhere from 2 to 5 years for Iran to rebuild its nuclear program. And Iran is extremely sneaky. It's like sneakier than your spouse's excuses when they forget your anniversary. They'll go covert. They'll say anything they need to say to continue to build their nuclear program. So maybe Iran builds something smaller. Maybe they use hidden sites. Maybe they use mobile labs and shipping containers. Maybe some of those trucks that we saw in that June 19th imagery prior to the massive ordnance penetrator strikes. Maybe they were using those trucks to slip something away to a remote site. And who knows, maybe they're making deals with Pyongyang, with Kim Jong-un, to try to get some sort of centrifuge tech. And maybe even China could slip in some sort of dual use.
What happened with Xi Jinping? I would hear you a lot of talk about Xi Jinping having some trouble. Then you got Putin, people taking out his command. Ukraine is taking those guys out. These guys are getting hurt. Anyways.
Equipment that's marked as civilian tech, but they're actually using it to get close to that weapons grade uranium. So likely the weaponeering cell, the precursor to the next weaponeering cell, is already watching that site again. They're watching for new construction, they're watching for truck convoys, and they're looking for shady deals from Pyongyang or other places to see where the next scheme will take a run with their nuclear program. What do you think? Will Iran double down or will they back off? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know what you think that big white building is. That's a mystery. Hopefully
other stuff. Let's see. Let's go here. Before we start, this is News Nation. This is Reality Check with Ross Coltart. So give them a shout out and everything. Project Stargate. For those that don't know, Project Stargate had a lot to do with UFOs, psychics, remote viewing, stuff like that. Trump made a new Stargate, I think, to try to erase this one, the real one. His Trump Stargate is stupid artificial intelligence, which is to replace humans, pretty much the need for them in the workforce as much. Definitely shouldn't have ever been made. But anyways, let's get
Hello and welcome back to Reality Check. Now, I'm very excited about our guest today. When I was a young child in the 1970s, which is far too long ago for what I care to imagine, one of the most enthralling acts on TV and on the stage wasn't a musician, it wasn't an artist, it was an Israeli-British man called Uri Geller, who claimed to have psychic abilities. And he enthralled audiences around the world with his seeming ability to apparently bend spoons and stop clocks with his mind. He demonstrated what were apparently astonishing feats of telepathy, finding hidden objects, remote viewing images, skills of dowsing and telepathy.
Yes.
But Uri has also long been attacked by debunkers and skeptics as a charlatan and a fraud because he claims these psychic powers. And much of the official mainstream media coverage of his career pejoratively dismisses him as an illusionist, a magician, an entertainer who supposedly uses trickery to deceive his audience into believing what he's doing is real. Uri, though, has suggested that the paranormal skills he claims to have may indeed have been bestowed on him, perhaps even by an extraterrestrial intelligence, and that's something we'll ask him about today. And of course, such claims just infuriate the splenetic debunkers. There's a skeptic called James Randi who became the eminence grise of Uri. He went to great efforts to try to prove that Uri's alleged tricks could be replicated with stage magic, simple sleight of hand. Now, I would say it's still very much an open question whether and how Uri Geller is psychic, how he does what he does, and that's because 7 years ago, in 2017, declassified documents from the CIA showed that Uri Geller did convince America's top intelligence agency in scientific testing that he really did have psychic abilities. This secret project, codenamed the Stargate project, made the official finding, quote, "As a result of Geller's success in this experimental period, we consider that he has demonstrated his paranormal perceptual ability in a convincing and unambiguous manner." The CIA's documents also show that Uri went on to work with the agency, helping it study his purported psychic powers, and in fact he was deployed on operations. They took him very, very seriously indeed, despite what the skeptics say. Uri will turn 78 in December, but he has very graciously and kindly agreed to speak to us today from his home in Israel. But first, a wee plug for one of our sponsors. So we're talking again this week through our sponsor about the horrors of what happens to your body when you eat the ultra-processed food that passes for grub in America. And it turns out the key to losing weight and keeping it off is not in carbs or fat or even in probiotic-rich foods. No, the end game of having a healthy weight as well as more energy and a long, healthy life comes down to a specific switch you can flip in your body to flush out unnecessary calories. Dr. Stephen Gundry is calling this caloric bypass. And by activating this specific process in your body, he has seen thousands of people dramatically improve their health, even at age 50 and beyond. This includes losing weight, getting tons more energy, and returning to the good health they had in their youth once they simply addressed this one key to better. He'll teach you exactly how he's kept his weight off.
Monologue, you should become my agent.
Let's roll back, Uri, to August 1973, which is 51 years ago this month. You were at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, in California doing experiments with Dr. Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ, where they were scientifically attempting to verify your paranormal perception abilities. And they did this under controlled scientific conditions. Do you recall those days?
Oh, absolutely. But I do have to backtrack a little back to Israel. You see, Mossad, the Israeli Secret Service, was very interested in my abilities, and they wanted to test me. But we're speaking about 1969. Mossad did not have the tools to test my brain. We're going back so many years. No tools to test Uri Geller. So what do? They call up the CIA and they ask for help. CIA is, wow, we definitely want to test Uri Geller. Let's get into America. Let's get into Stanford in Palo Alto. But they send a guy called Andrei Puharich to Israel to test me first, who was a medical doctor and quite a well-known scientist with ties to the CIA. And then I get a phone call and a letter from Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, the sixth man to walk on the moon. So that's how it developed towards Stanford Research Institute. And yeah, I do remember those days. They were very painful. I had to go through a battery of scientifically, controlled experiments, locked in shielded rooms, cameras filming me. You see, one of the experimenter beside Hal Puthoff was Russell Targ, who was actually an amateur magician. But we'll speak, actually, let me show you this photograph. This is an amazing photo. This is Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, and this is them 51 years later. Incredible.
Wow.
Thanks. I thank my brother-in-law for bringing that, because in my museum I have all these incredible displays. Anyhow, I had to prove myself because I was already becoming controversial. I was already a controversial figure in Israel. But I realized that Ross, controversy was good for me. No matter what they said, as long as they spell my name correctly, was always fantastic. So I had to go through these tests. But what you have seen, the video that SRI released, or in the documents that were released to publication, that's, believe it or not, is a tiny piece, a tiny little experiment that they allowed to show. You have no idea, and I can't go there, but what else I've done there for the CIA. Unbelievable. Nevertheless, I do remember those days. Incredible. The scientists, Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, were really nice. Everything was, as I said, under controlled conditions. And then they had to admit that it's real, because it is real, Ross.
Did it feel like a vindication for you, Uri? I mean, you've spent a large part of your career being slagged off, frankly, as a charlatan and a fraud. And I'm not in a position to be able to make a judgment, but I know Hal Puthoff, Dr. Hal Puthoff, very well. I know Hal would never falsify data, neither would Russell Targ. And I can tell the audience how seriously SRI took this research, and that's revealed in the CIA documents that were declassified. They put you into an electronically shielded, isolated room, didn't they? It was essentially a Faraday cage, so there was no possibility of you being able to communicate with the outside.
Absolutely. You're right, Ross. You could not, this was such tight control conditions. There is no way that someone could cheat or I mean, the things that they said about the shielded room were unbelievable. They even accused me, I think I have it here. They even accused me of having a transmitter up my tooth, believe it or not. Wait a minute, let me show it to you. By the way, I did not prepare all this. They are all around the area, because this is my CIA Mossad area. Look, they claimed, and this comes from a very prestigious magazine called New Scientist. They claimed that I had a transmitter up my tooth and somebody was Morse coding me outside the shielded room. There was nobody anyone from my team outside the shielded room. How ridiculous. I mean, if I really had, Ross, a transmitter up my tooth, it would be a bigger phenomenon than bending spoons with the power of the mind, okay?
But one thing I do want to address, and we have to deal with this because I think it's important to give you the opportunity to respond to these claims. There was actually an article published in the very prestigious scientific journal Nature where two psychologists, one called Marks and another called Kamen, they flatly made an allegation that took me by surprise because I know how Hal operates. There's no way he or Russell Targ would have tolerated this. But the claim was that you were allowed to peek through a hole in the laboratory wall separating you from the drawings you were being invited to reproduce, and that these drawings were supposedly placed on a wall opposite the peephole that the investigators Targ and Puthoff had stuffed with cotton gauze. And when anybody watches the video, it's quite clear that what Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ were using was a controlled blind test. These images that you were remote viewing were actually in sealed, double sealed envelopes, weren't they?
Yes, absolutely. This thing with the hole that you're talking about, Ross. I mean, you're talking to Superman, if so, or Flash Gordon, or Daredevil. If I had holes there, how did anyhow? Nonsense. I did it purely. Call it telepathy, call it remote viewing, call it whatever you want to call it. I sat in that shielded room and I duplicated the drawings. Some of them were so precise, Ross, like the bunch of grapes, 24 grapes. They drew 24 grapes. I got 24 grapes. Some of my drawings.
I don't want to be too brief with this because I think the grapes one is actually a very good example. So let's just go through this. They got a person to draw an image, a black and white image of, as kind of a skeleton image of a bunch of grapes. And there were 24 grapes in a particular configuration, in a particular shape. And what I found fascinating was that you actually got not only the shape, but the number of grapes.
Yeah, well, I don't know how I did that, but I drew 24 grapes. I had no idea that their, bunch of grapes also had 24. This is just one set of experiments. Then there were many others conducted with a computer. So, for instance, the scientists themselves did not know, to the best of my recollection, what the computer chose to draw. So in one experiment, the computer drew a kite, a kite with a tail and the ribbons. And I drew a kite. And this is coming from the mind of a computer. So apparently, whether it's remote viewing or telepathy or another strange, mysterious ability that we all have probably, I managed to extract the kite out of a computer with no human being around. The experimenter knows that the computer chose to draw a drawing of a kite.
I think what disturbs me as a journalist, Uri, is I don't know one way or the other about your skill set. But what I do find alarming is the dishonesty that has been referenced in some mainstream media reporting of your alleged skills, because there's been a flagrant misrepresentation of the SRI work. It was done with incredibly rigorous scientific controlled blind standards, wasn't it?
Of course, very much so. And otherwise the CIA would have not published this. And then, Nature magazine wouldn't have touched it. Nature is one of the most prestigious scientific magazine in the world. But look, listen, Ross, hold on.
Nature, of course, was having a go at you because the two psychologists who wrote the piece
for
Nature.
Oh, yeah, if it wasn't did have truth in it, they wouldn't have admitted to doing the program. Of course, it's surprising. Yeah, they didn't really admit to it in the first place, hardly. As well as some things were leaked out and they decided to just let it out. The proof is out there. I've already, hold on, I need to get some sugar. That's Well, let's see, I've already actually. That's not on there. Damn it. Let's see. This is a back scroll. Very stupid. Let me see here. I've already done stuff on this. And not enough people watching this or anything. I actually get tired of stuff. Nobody's in here talking, so I'm gonna end this stream. Anyways, if people should look up stuff on this about Stargate, not just for him but other sources as well. Good stuff to know about. Telepathy, psychic stuff, abilities, and remote viewing and everything. Anyways,